All right. So I was just amazed this morning just listening to the singing and seeing everybody in here. I don't think that for most of the years of use of this building, this annex, this fellowship hall, anybody ever thought we could pull off worship in here. So a few acoustic panels, some really good tech, and a whole lot of willing spirits, and here we are. A month and a half into worshiping back here, and it's just absolutely great. I was telling the shepherds, we had a meeting last week, and everybody said, well, what have we heard? What's the feedback? And I said, well, I haven't heard anything bad. And they said, yeah, we haven't heard anything good either. We've just not heard. And so I think most of the comments we got were, well, that's a lot better than I thought it would be. And so, but I have heard some people say the singing is really good. It's just really nice having everybody packed in close and how vibrant the singing sounds. And I was noticing that this morning. And the praise team sounded really, really good this morning. Didn't you guys think? They don't get much applause. They don't want applause, but they, something in the water. Glenn, did you drink different coffee this morning? Or, something was going on. Oh, okay, all right. No, everybody. I heard the bass booming and the sopranos. They sounded really great. So we just appreciate all the work everybody does, all the preparation that they do. They do a lot of preparation and practice, all the work that the tech team does back there to make them sound good. And Hans, they don't even know that we turned the auto-tune on this week. They have no idea. No, just kidding. They sounded really good. Everybody's doing great. So we appreciate it. I know it's different being back here, and we're going to be back here for a couple more months. Right now, they're still telling us that it looks like, mid to end of February is what they have scheduled for the end of construction. But you know how construction goes, so we'll have to wait and see how that is. They haven't hit any hiccups so far. I know a lot of you have asked about seeing in there. They lock it, actually screw panels over there during the weekends because they don't want it'd be a liability issue if our kids were to get in there and hurt themselves. I'm going to ask them if there's a way we can actually get in, if somebody wants to see it on a weekend. But if you come during the week, if you just want to pop in during the week, even during the evenings on the weekend, during the week, it's open and you can walk through there. Obviously, be careful. There's extension cord spread and lumber laying around. But if you're able to and you want to pop in during the week sometime, and especially if I'm here, Jared's here, we'll be glad to give you a tour and kind of help you see it. But things are happening. The wall where you come in, the walls are all in place. You can walk through where the bathrooms will be and where the entrance to the kids area will be. And within another week or two, they're expecting to have the front porch closed in, not with glass yet, just with plywood, so they can start working on the interior of it. And they really want to do that fast because they were out here this week and they were, doing this because it got chilly while they were working out there. So there's a lot going on. We've got a really busy weekend next weekend because we're going to do this Christmas tree lighting. So I know several of my lumberjack men are going to go with me today. If you don't know what I'm talking about and you want to join us, just stay and after church. But I got some big burly lumberjack men. They're going to pile, I think, into the church van, and we're going to go get some lunch at Cracker Barrel and then drive to Princeton to the tree farm, and we're going to chop this 20 or 25-foot Christmas tree down and put it on a trailer one way or another, bring it back here. Danny's made us a stand for it. We're going to try and put it in the stand. Trey got Equipment Depot to donate a lift for the weekend. So we got a lift. We're going to raise the tree, and then about 3:30, we think we'll be back here maybe 2:30 and start trying to get the tree up. So we're saying at 3:30, if anybody who wants to come and help us decorate it, we have about 40 giant ornaments and then 20 net lights and a big star on top we're going to put on that. So if you want to join us at 3:30, and if you're here this morning, you say, I want to go be a lumberjack, just let me know. About 15, 20 minutes after church ends, we'll probably pile in the church van, those of us that are going to do that. So next weekend, Saturday afternoon, we're going to have, we've invited 3,000 households in our community through flyers, and we want you to invite all your friends. Seriously, call your neighbors, call your friends, whether they're Christians or not, better if they're not, maybe, I don't know. Just invite them to come onto our property and be part of this. We're going to have a live nativity with camels and donkeys and baby Jesus and all that stuff. We're going to have pictures with Santa. We're going to have some other churches are coming in, and they're going to set up a table to do decorate ornaments, wood ornaments. Kids can color with Sharpies and hang on the tree. We're going to have cookies and cocoa. We're going to have music. It's going to be fantastic. We're going to have all that out here in the back on the grass as long as it doesn't rain. And then we'll move up here at about 5:45 to the tree, where we're going to have the praise team is going to lead us in a couple Christmas carols. I'm going to say just a few brief words, and then David Dobbins, he is the assistant principal at the middle school, he is going to do the ceremonial lighting of the tree, and it's going to be a really, really neat thing. And so obviously for us, the event gives us a reason to do the mail out, and we want to let people know in the community that we love them and we care about them. So we're excited just to be able to do the mail out, but we also hope that we'll have hundreds of people come onto our property and meet us. There'll be an opportunity. Jonas is going to lead a prayer table where there'll just be a table set up where, if somebody wants to come and put in a prayer request or have a prayer, and there'll be opportunity to talk about who our church is and why we're here. We're also inviting other churches to be part of this, and they can give information about their church. So invite everybody you know. It's just going to be fantastic. We're really, really excited about it. And then next Sunday, after that Saturday, Sunday is going to be our Harvest Sunday. And so just like in the past, we're going to all bring our groceries in here, and we're going to have that big, ugly cart that we put the PCM stuff in. We'll have that up here. There it is right there. We're redoing everything. We need to redo that cart. So, but we're going to have all the groceries, put them in there, and this, if you sign up on the needs list, you know what you're bringing. If you didn't sign up in the needs list, any kind of shelf-stable prepackaged snacks, Capri Suns, bottles of water, macaroni cups, Chef Boyardee, granola bars, Pop-Tarts, anything like that. And we will take all that over into the auditorium, and then at 5 o'clock, the youth group's going to come. They're going to eat, do some stuff, and then at 5:30, we're inviting anybody who wants to come next Sunday night to pack the Christmas boxes, and we'll do that kind of the way we normally do. And then they'll be taken to Reedland Intermediate School on Wednesday, and they'll be distributed to 24 families who need a Christmas meal. And so that's a real joy for us every year. So we got a lot of stuff going on, a lot of Christmassy stuff. And then probably the biggest one, the one you've all been waiting for, is on New Year's Eve, we're going to have our karaoke party. So, yeah, Bill's already working on his Johnny Cash, right? No? Okay, I don't know. We got to work on your acts, and we're going to have our karaoke party. All right, that's enough announcements. I just wanted to share all that with you this morning. I want to share with you an article. I'm going to read some of it verbatim that was in the Christian Chronicle several weeks ago. I think I've got a picture here on screen. I've got black back here, so I don't know. Okay, there we go. This is a man named Sandro Jaden, and he was interviewed in the Christian Chronicle a few weeks ago. If you don't know what the Christian Chronicle is, it is a newspaper about members of Churches of Christ, events that happen and people in Churches of Christ. And so let me read you a little bit of this article from October 18th. Sandro Jaden was standing in the birthplace of Christ when he got the Tzava Adam alert on his phone. That is a Hebrew alert that means the color red. The red alert notice on the messaging app Telegram was to indicate that Hamas was firing rockets from Gaza. At first, the Arab-Israeli tour guide, a member of the Nazareth Church of Christ, didn't think much of it. This happens at least once every 2 years, he said, equating the attack with the tornado season in Oklahoma. He said, Israel's powerful Iron Dome system intercepts most of the rockets. We live under a shield. But Jaden was in Bethlehem, a site of the Christian pilgrimage in the area of the West Bank controlled by the Palestinian Authority. The tourist in his care was praying inside the Church of the Nativity. Bethlehem is usually very, very safe, Jaden said. But crossing the border to get back home might be difficult if the situation were to escalate. He asked a local what was going on. The man showed him his cell phone, which played videos of Hamas militants attacking people at a music festival. Look how we shot them. Look how we killed them, the man said. And I'm like boiling and scared, Jaden told the Christian Chronicle, as he recalled the bloody Saturday when the latest conflict began in his homeland. Jaden remained calm and nodded grimly so the man would not suspect that I don't agree with him, he said. I want safety for all innocent civilians. Meanwhile, there are being rockets intercepted above our heads, not aimed at Bethlehem, but going towards Jerusalem, Israeli territory. Now, we're all familiar with the horrific atrocities that have taken place over the last few weeks in Israel and Palestine. But can you imagine living there in the middle of it? Can you imagine being in the middle of that conflict at this moment? And moreover, can you imagine living there and feeling like you don't fit in with either group? You see, Sandro is ethnically Palestinian, but he's not a Muslim or a Jew, he's a Christian. And he lives in Israel and appreciates the democratic government and the strong national defense it offers, so he's very divided. He goes on to say this, I am Palestinian in blood, he said. I want to see them in statehood, spending that money they receive from the world on infrastructure, not to teach hate. I would love to see peace here. At the same time, he's thankful for the protection his nation's military provides. We are for Israel and the protection of its citizens because we are its citizens. And we appreciate that, he said. We love them. We admire them. We are proud to be Arab Israelis. Sandro is, in essence, an alien or a foreigner in his own homeland. He lives there, but he doesn't really belong there. He doesn't really fit in or identify with any of the people groups he lives among. Again, in his own words, we are a minority within a minority within a minority, he says. About 182,000 people, or 1.9% of Israel's population, claim Christianity as their faith. Less than 7% of the Arab population identifies itself as Christian. As a result, Arab Israeli Christians face an identity crisis when conflict arises, Jaden says. Have you ever wondered what it's like to live as an outsider? Have you ever wondered what it's like to struggle with the language, the culture, the religion? To even wonder if you can trust others or if they trust you. My great-grandparents on my dad's side, both paternal and maternal, were immigrants. They both came from Europe. So I kind of can understand this. You're looking to hear it, just some details about my great-great-grandfather on my dad's side, Daniel Brophy, who was born in 1823 in Ireland, or 1825-ish. We're not really totally sure of the birth date. He came over sometime in the 1840s or 50s on a boat out of Dublin. He married Anne Craven, who was born in Ireland in 1830, and they ended up in New Jersey. First-generation Irish-American immigrants. On my dad's mom's side, this handsome-looking fellow is John Sitkowski. That was my grandmother's father, and he was born in 1880 in Frampol, Poland. Arrived in 1964, or died in 1964. Arrived in the U.S. sometime in between. He married Madeline Liwak in Poland in 1905. So sometime in the early 1900s, maybe about 1910, they arrived in Detroit and settled in. So my family knows a little bit in our family history about being immigrants. In fact, my dad's family in New Jersey, the Brophies, have stories about being Irish immigrants. Now, if you know much of your American history and you know much about the East Coast, the Irish were not a very appreciated people in the East Coast in the early days of our country's settling. In fact, they were considered to be raucous, drunks, fighters, and they were persecuted. There was some pretty heavy persecution against the Irish. And there's some stories of what it was like being Irish immigrants. Now, my dad's mom's family, they came to Detroit and they cloistered together. And so there's an entire area called Hamtramck, a neighborhood in Detroit, that's pretty much all Polish people. And they would go there, and even when my dad was growing up, even when I was growing up, we would go to family gatherings where everybody there was Polish. Have you seen My Big Fat Greek Wedding? Okay, you kind of can get it. I mean, except just change the culture a little bit. Lots of pierogies, lots of sauerkraut, lots of kielbasa, and a lot of very heavy people sitting around eating and laughing and being loud, okay? And so they just stuck together, and it kind of created a little cloister of Polish people living in Detroit, and that way they could keep their culture. And really, that's kind of what happens for immigrants. You kind of have one of two choices. One, you either stick with your people and maintain your identity and your culture. This is why we have Chinatowns. This is why we have Little Italies. This is why we have Little Havana. We have places where people settled in mass, and they decide we're going to stay together. We're going to kind of circle the borders. We're going to protect our culture, and we're going to keep those cultural markers even though we're living in a foreign land. Or you can drop all that and just try to blend in. And so that's when people enculturate and they change their identity. During the Syrian war, about 10 years ago, Germany took in around 1 million Syrian refugees. What did these refugees do? Well, many of them immediately started filling the empty seats of Germany's massive cathedrals and churches. Many of these churches that were sitting nearly empty, contemplating whether they would close their doors or not, suddenly were filled with Syrian refugees. Syria is not classically a Christian country. Why was this happening? Because they knew that Europe was classically Christian and they wanted to blend in. So one of the first things these immigrants who were pretty disenchanted with Islam after what ISIS did, one of the first things they did was they came in and said, we're going to become Christians. That'll help us. We want to learn the language. We want to become Christians. That'll help us integrate into society. And they filled these churches. They left behind their culture markers and immediately tried to dive in to the culture. And that's kind of the only choices you have when you're an immigrant. You can either cloister together and strengthen numbers, protect your culture, or you can completely abandon it and try to blend in. And so as we talk about being an alien or a foreigner in the passage that was read to us this morning, we got to think in terms of what does that really mean? Because for most of us, we're not very foreign and we're not very alien in the culture we live in. Now, when I was 18 years old, I had lived my entire life in Detroit. I spent the next 4 years in Searcy, Arkansas. When I moved to Kentucky, people said, what is it like going from Detroit to Kentucky? I'm like, no, I went to Arkansas for 4 years. I came back to civilization. So this is, and actually Arkansas is just a wonderful state. It's a beautiful state. It gets a bad rap, but it's very different than Detroit. It's very different. I'd say I dressed cool in Detroit. Man, I dressed cool. I was a gangster, I dressed cool. I got to Arkansas. People thought I had 3 heads. They're like, what are you? You should be wearing Tommy Hilfiger. What are you doing? It was just a different world for me. And that's within the same country, within what would be considered the same culture. Can you imagine going somewhere where you don't speak the language, where you don't understand the cultural markers, where you don't understand what's going on? My sister lived in Shanghai for 3 years. She said, everywhere she went, she got in line, and people would push and shove their way in front of her in line. And as an American, she thought this was really, really rude. And she could never figure it out. But they had a driver. They were assigned a driver as part of their, as Americans living in a communist country. And she would ask him, what is something? Am I missing something? He'd be like, yeah, they're not being rude. This is what you get to the front of the line. Like, it's rude to not. She never could quite get her head around it. She couldn't read the cultural signs. And when we endeavor to follow Jesus, where he leads us, where you lead us, we will follow, right? Where you lead me, I will follow. Jesus, we endeavor to lead us. If he's calling us to be aliens and strangers, we need to realize he's calling us to something that's really difficult. He's calling us to take this new identity as a foreigner in the place that we call home. So let's read this passage from 1 Peter again. But you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness and into his wonderful light. Once you were not a people, but now you are the people of God. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. Dear friends, I urge you, as foreigners and exiles, abstain from the sinful desires that wage war against your soul. Live such good lives among the pagans, that though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day he visits us. Now, in this passage, we're called to be foreigners and exiles. A foreigner exile is somebody who stands out. You remember, we're all old enough now. Sesame Street's been around long enough now that many of us who would be considered older remember watching it as a kid. I wasn't even the first generation. There's people 10 years older than me that watch Sesame Street. So when we think about the song in Sesame Street, one of these things is not like the other, that's kind of a really good illustration for being an outsider, being an exile, being a foreigner. I want to show you a couple pictures here real quick. One of these things is not like the other. Let's see if we can get these up on screen. People who don't belong. Is it? Okay, there we go. Yeah, so these are some AI-generated pictures that, if you get online now, half the pictures are generated by computers. They're not real. But people put in, give me something that looks different, one that stands out. And so you've got this white puffin penguin, this black sheep, a rooster among chicks, basically. And you look at any of those pictures, your eye is immediately drawn. There's one that's different. Have you ever felt like that one? Have you ever felt like the one that's standing out, not in a good way? You felt like you're in a crowd and everybody's looking at you going, you don't belong here? You know, you thought it was a costume party and it was a formal dress party, and you're like, I'm in the wrong. You know, you are standing out in a bad way. That's what the feeling is of being a foreigner and an exile. It's a people who don't belong. People who are living here, interacting with society. They're not clustered off in a holy huddle. They're in the society, but it's obvious that they're different than the society around them. They knowingly choose to live different. And you almost want to say, God, wait a minute, what? What? You want us to live like cultural outsiders? You want us to live like we don't belong? You want us to live like we're from another place, like we don't really fit with the people around us? And so you think, well, maybe this is just a passing illustration here in 2 Peter. Maybe this is something Peter said one time, and it's just a minor note, and it's just kind of like, oh yeah, that's helpful, aliens, foreigners, but it's not the major theme of Scripture. Well, then we have to reconcile that Paul said the same thing as Peter in Philippians 3, where Paul says, but our citizenship is in heaven, and we eagerly await for a Savior from there, the Lord Jesus Christ. And that the author of Hebrews, when he's talking about all the great heroes of the faith in Hebrews 11, says this: all these people were still living by faith when they died. They did not receive the things they promised. They only saw them and welcomed them from a distance, admitting that they were foreigners and strangers on the earth. So now we have two places in the New Testament that we're told that our citizenship isn't here, that we need to live as foreigners and strangers. And we have a place in the New Testament that says, oh, by the way, all the heroes of the faith in the Old Testament, they considered themselves to be foreigners and strangers. So now we just got to start paying attention. We're like, this isn't just a minor note. This is now a theme that's running through Scripture. But it's not just in Scripture. It's all through the early church. After the close of the New Testament, Christians began to write. And they began to write a lot. And they would write letters to each other. They didn't have written Bibles, bound Bibles that they could read. And so they wrote letters to each other saying, hey, by the way, Paul told us this. Hey, by the way, Peter told us this. Oh, by the way, we had a letter from this guy that wrote, and they shared those with each other, so much so that if we wanted to, we could actually take the letters that we call the early church fathers, and we could take all the quotes of the New Testament Bible and put them together, and we could reconstruct almost the entire New Testament just out of quotes. They were quoting it to each other so much. And they wrote, and they wrote, and they wrote, and they wrote, encouraging one another. In fact, all of this writing is what eventually led to the first universities. The entire university system in the world started because of Christians. Started to teach as schools to teach the Bible in the Middle Ages and forward. And even up in, you know, the University of Kentucky started as Bacon College, which was a Bible college, started in the Restoration movement. Almost every public university and many of our private universities in the United States that were started before the year 1930 started as Christian colleges to teach the Bible. All this education, the printing press, all that was because of Christians wanting to encourage each other and teach each other. And what did they write about? Well, all kinds of things. But one of the things, especially in the first couple hundred years, was this idea of being an alien and a stranger. So there's this guy named Clement. Clement was from Rome, and he was a friend of Paul and a disciple of Peter. So he lived just after the time of Jesus. He knew Peter, and he learned at Peter's feet, was friends with Paul. And after they both died, he became a pretty important person in the church, writing lots of letters, going around encouraging the churches. And Clement, around AD 93 to 97, wrote this: the church of God residing as aliens in Rome, he's saying who he's writing it to the church of God residing as aliens in Corinth. About 25 years later, a guy named Polycarp, who was a disciple of the Apostle John, so he learned at the feet of John, he writes a letter where he is writing this to the Philippian Christians, about AD 117 to 120, and he says, to the resident alien church at Philippi. Polycarp will later, in other letters, and for the rest of his life, he will refer to the universal church, the whole church, as the church which sojourns. Over and over again, he will call the church sojourners. Now, a sojourner is somebody who is traveling through and doesn't have a permanent home. Now, maybe most importantly is this guy, Augustine. Augustine lived a couple hundred years later. And so about 426, he wrote his seminal work, The City of God. Augustine was probably the most influential of all the early church fathers. So much of what's happened in the last 1600 years in the church is based on the work of Augustine. Augustine wrote a book called The City of God. And this is what he writes about. In his work, he draws a metaphor, a parallel between Cain and Abel, in that Cain is the world, and Cain builds a city populated by the citizens of the world, and Abel represents the people of God who are strangers. And so it's kind of a tale of two cities, and they run their course over time, and Cain being the firstborn, Abel being the secondborn, Cain being of the world, Abel being of God. And he finally says this: accordingly it's recorded of Cain that he built a city, but Abel being a sojourner built none. For the city of the saints is above. And so in the city of God, Augustine is drawing this idea out that our identity in this world is not city builders, it's not kingdom builders, it's sojourners. We don't need to build kingdoms on this earth. We don't need to build cities on this earth. We don't need to build homes on this earth, because our citizenship is in a different place. And we are in this world, but in this world as Christians, we live as people who are just passing through it. And so throughout the early years of the church, there's this long history of emphasizing our role as our identity as aliens, foreigners, and sojourners, as a people who are only passing through. We're not too interested in getting deep roots and getting tangled up in the affairs of this world. We're resident aliens. Now, I don't think that as Christians, we think of ourselves very often as resident aliens. In fact, I think for the last couple hundred years, we've tended to think of ourselves as kingdom builders. Building Christian nations, Christian kingdoms, Christendom. We've wanted to win the world through political power or social power or social influence. Here in America, we somehow got the twisted idea that the USA is the city of God, that we could plant roots here and build political structures and try to make this place heaven on earth, because obviously God chose this land and plans to set up house and live right here. That's the kind of thinking that wiped out Native Americans. That's the kind of thinking that enslaved African people. That's the kind of thinking that has caused a lot of turmoil in our world. And it's arrogance. It's arrogance to believe. By what right do we claim that this is God's country? Did God say to Abraham, go get on a boat, cross the Atlantic to the promised land I've given you? Did God declare that the first country to implement successfully a representative republic would be his chosen people? Did God ever once say anything about democracy as his chosen form of government? No. God wanted a theocracy where he ruled. We've been so arrogant that we've said, oh, we've got democracy. It's the way that God would do things, and we need to spread. God didn't say that. We're arrogant, thinking that somehow God is more pleased with us living today in America than he is with Sandro Jaden, whose father is the minister at the Nazareth Church of Christ just steps away from where Jesus was born, or Jesus' childhood home was. It's arrogance to think that somehow God is more interested in our presidential election than he is in the lives of more than 100 million Christians being persecuted for their faith right now. 90,000 martyred in the last year, a Christian killed every 6 minutes around the world. But God's more interested in who we elect than he is in that. We're arrogant to think that God thinks that the 200 or million so Christians in the U.S. are more important than the estimated 600 or 700 million Christians living in Africa. We've gotten caught up in being kingdom builders rather than being aliens and foreigners and sojourners. We are not called to be American Christians. We are called to be Christians who are resident aliens in America. Does that mean you can't be patriotic? No. You can be patriotic. You can love your country. Does it mean you can't be proud of your country? No, it doesn't mean that. Does that mean you can't be involved in the political process? No. It really doesn't have much to do with your activity. It has more to do with your attitude. Are you proud of your country because you think God chose it above others? Are you involved in the political process because you think it's a weapon that can be wielded to bend others to God's will? Because that's what kingdom builders do. We are called to live such quiet lives among them that though they would accuse us of evil, they can't. Paul was a Roman citizen. Don't get me wrong. he was not afraid to call upon the rights and privileges of being a Roman citizen when it was advantageous to the kingdom. And that's the key, to further the kingdom, because that's where Paul's allegiance was. And we should be proud to be Americans. We should be proud to have religious freedom because that gives us the opportunity to use that freedom for the kingdom. If we're following Jesus, we're aligned with him. We live here, but our hearts are there. We don't secure our hopes on who the next president is because our hope in the future is secured in the cross of Christ. We are aliens, strangers, foreigners, and sojourners. In my 20s, I took several trips to Honduras. During one of those trips, I learned some Spanish. But by some Spanish, I mean about 30 words. If you know about, I know it's funny, but if you know about 30 words, you can actually do a lot of what you need to do. Where's the bathroom? How do I get here? Stuff like that. Since I knew about 30 words in Spanish, I got designated as the driver when we got to the airport. We rented 2 trucks. That's some of our group, and that's actually the actual truck I'm going to talk about. That is a 4-cylinder diesel manual truck. We rented that, and then we rented an SUV. And so we piled a bunch of people, like 8 or 10 people into the SUV, and it was a 6-cylinder, and we put all of the luggage in the back of that truck, and we packed 6 of us in the cab of that truck. And we left the airport, and the lead vehicle was a Mitsubishi Montego, Monterey, something with an M. They had if you've never been to Honduras, you know anything about it. It's very mountainous. It's very, very mountainous. In fact, the airport where you fly in Tegucigalpa is the most dangerous airport in the world because you pretty much have to nosedive into the airport and pull up at the last second. It's terrifying. You bank around the mountains and you are literally maybe 500 feet off the side of the mountain. You see the roofs shaking on the shacks as you come in for a landing. It's wild. So we get there, and we're going out into these mountains. And so we leave the airport, and we're driving through the town, and that 6-cylinder that just has, 8 bodies in it just vroom up these hills. And I got 2,000 pounds of luggage in the back and 6 people in this 4-cylinder. I'm, whoa, doing 30 miles an hour up these mountains, and they are gone. Well, we didn't organize it very well, so they had the directions, and we didn't know where we were going. So all we knew is we're going to a place called Colonia Mateo. And so we're driving around looking at signs in Spanish. There's one guy in the cab with me that was fairly decent at Spanish, Randy Travis, one of the elders of the church there, and he's kind of pointing this way and that, and we get totally lost. So we pull into a gas station, and we go in, and we're asking if anybody speaks English. Nobody speaks English, so we're trying to say, hey, how do we get to Colonia Mateo? Finally they say, oh, there's a taxi cab driver who lives there, and he will take you. And we're like, great. And they're like, there he is. And he climbs in the vehicle with us. He doesn't have a cab. We're like, okay, he's a taxi cab driver, doesn't have a cab. But if we give him a ride, he's going there anyway. If we give him a ride, him and his child, a ride there, and pay him, then he'll give us directions. So it's like a taxi cab where we're providing the cab. Like, okay, hey, you know what? This works. We got to get there. So him and his kid climb in the cab. So 2 of our people have to get in the back on top of all the luggage. Well, short-sighted, one of them was the only guy that speaks any Spanish. So he gets in the back, and he was an elder of the church, and he didn't want somebody else to get hurt. So he says, I'll get in the back. So he's hanging on to the luggage, on top of the luggage, the back of this truck, and we're riding around. And at first it was okay until I'm just driving along, and the guy goes, derecha! And I'm like, what? Well, that means left, but I didn't know it, and I'm like, so I don't know what to do. And so then about 30 minutes, he's like yelling at me, and I'm turning too late at the wrong place, the wrong direction. I have no idea what he's saying. He's getting mad. I'm like freaking out. Now, this would be one thing if it was in America. But in Honduras, if you want to pass somebody, you don't use a blinker. You just hold your horn as you go around them. If you want to run a red light, you don't slow down and look and make sure no one's coming. You just speed up and hold your horn as you go through red light. If you want to drive on the sidewalk, you just hold your horn. So while he's doing this, I'm hearing, and cars are whipping around me, and I am absolutely terrified. I have no idea what's going on. And this guy's yelling at me in Spanish, and everybody's like, Brian, I think he's telling you to do this. And they're telling me the wrong thing. So finally, I pull over at the side of the road, and we have a conversation as much as we can with the 30 words I know, and he knew like 2 English words, which were like awesome and hi, I think were the only words he knew. But it was good because when I made the right turn, he went, awesome! I was like, yeah, all right. So I just, we got where he would shake his hand as we came up to the road of the direction I needed to go, And so eventually we got there, and it was crazy. So this experience to me always stands on my mind as being the outsider, being the foreigner, being the alien, because I knew it wasn't his fault. I'm in his country. They speak it's my fault. What was I thinking, arrogant American, that I can just come down there, rent a car, and just start driving around, and I don't know the rules or the language? It's my fault. It's totally my fault. But I was so frustrated because I couldn't communicate. I couldn't understand. I didn't understand the road signs. I didn't understand the way that the traffic worked. Being an alien, being a foreigner is not an easy thing. Sometimes in our world, as Christians, we do feel it. Maybe you've been in this situation. You're new on the job. You're trying to make connections. You're trying to make friends. You're trying to make sure that people like you because you know it's going to matter because you have to have relationships with them for the work. And then they say, hey, man, it's quitting time. We're all going to hit the bar. You want to come? And you're like, I don't think that's going to be a good thing for me. And it's hard. It's hard, right? I had an uncle who got caught up in that, going to the bar with his coworkers after work. I ended up reviving the alcoholism that he had struggled with earlier in his life. Lost his marriage, lost his family. Maybe it looks like this. You get engaged, and you're young. You're 20, 21, 22, 23 years old, and you get engaged, you're going to get married, and your friends start going, what are you doing? Are you crazy? Why would you want, everybody ends up getting divorced. Why would you want to get married? What are you thinking? You just need to live with her. You just need to live with her a while. Test it out. And you're going, and you're caught between two worlds. Maybe you've got kids and you're struggling with them and you're trying to provide discipline and you have other parents who are saying to you, boys will be boys, kids will be kids. Just go let them sow their wild oats. It's not going to hurt anything. And you're like, that doesn't really, I don't think. Or maybe you get the, well, you're just so holy, aren't you? Oh, you're goody two-shoes. Oh, yeah, you go to, oh, yeah, you're so holy. You can't do these things. There's all these places where our values as aliens and foreigners, as citizens of the kingdom of God, collide with the values of the culture we live in. And we kind of get stuck in no-win situations. And we're going, God, why are you calling me to this? Why are you asking me to live like a weirdo inside this culture? Why are you calling me to be... And the answer is right there in the passage from Peter. Because when we live holy lives, and we may be derided as aliens, as foreigners, as weirdos, but when we live holy lives quietly, not wielding political power, not trying to force other people, but just living holy lives, even when they try to accuse us for evil, they won't. They can't. And in the end, it will be to God's glory. Because in the end, they'll say, wow, your marriage has lasted 35 or 40 years, and I've been married 4 times. Maybe you had something going back there when we were 20, and you didn't want to sleep around with everybody, even though I was telling you should. Maybe you knew something I did. Maybe I need a little bit of what you got. Wow, your kids really are doing well in life. I wish mine were. Man, mine are really... Maybe I didn't have all the answers when I thought I did. Could I learn what you were... And guys, it's not a formula. It's not you do this and this and this and this is going to happen. But God's saying when you live my way, there's blessings in that. And the world will notice. You're a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession. You were not a people, but now you are a people. Live as aliens and strangers. In the end, our quiet and holy lives will be a testimony that speaks out to the broken world around us. That you're not content with all of this. That the status quo of the world we live in, of the culture around us, is not the status quo you want because we are waiting for something much, much better. We're waiting for the promised land. We're waiting for that kingdom that God is bringing that will be so much better than what the world around us has to offer. So yes, the identity of the church is has been and always will be aliens, foreigners, exiles, sojourners, odd people, peculiar people, holy people. That's where he's leading us. Will we follow? Let's stand together and sing.